Okay, so this story is wild. It's about how an adopted kid built a $2 trillion empire. And he didn't do it from some fancy corner office, nope. He did it from the passenger seat of a beat-up Chevy Blazer. He literally typed out a business plan on a cross-country drive. And 30 years later, that plan became this. This machine that completely reshaped our world. It all started with one, honestly, almost unbelievable number.
Yeah, this is the number, 2,300%. Back in 1994, Jeff Bezos stumbled across a report that said the internet was growing at an annual rate of 2,300%. To him, this wasn't just some trend. It was like a force of nature, a gravitational pull, an opportunity that was just way too big to ignore.
So who even was this guy? Well, at the time, Jeff Bezos was a senior vice president at a pretty mysterious Wall Street hedge fund called D.E. Shaw. It was a place known for hiring, as one source put it, brilliantly weird people. He was successful, he had a great job, but that one number had sparked an idea that he just could not shake.
Now, what's so interesting here is the logic. Bezos did exactly what you'd expect a brilliant analyst to do. He made a spreadsheet. He listed 20 potential products you could sell online. CDs, clothing, you name it. Even dog food. But books, they were the clear winner. And why? Well, because there were millions of titles, they were compact, and already standardized. They were, in his words, the perfect gateway drug to e-commerce.
So he walks into his boss's office, right? And he explains his plan to quit his very prestigious Wall Street job to sell books on the internet. His boss, David Shaw, listened to the whole pitch and then said, "That sounds like a great idea for someone who doesn't already have a good job." I mean, it was a warning, for sure. But for Bezos, the regret of not trying was a far, far bigger risk than failing.
And this is where the legend really begins. He actually quit. He and his wife, Mackenzie, packed up their entire lives and started driving from New York all the way to Seattle. While Mackenzie drove their Chevy Blazer, Jeff sat right there in the passenger seat typing out the Amazon business plan on his laptop. Seriously. Somewhere along Interstate 80, the world's largest online retailer was born.
You know, it almost wasn't even called Amazon. His first choice was Cadabra, like abracadabra. That wasn't until his lawyer misheard it as cadaver, which is not exactly great for selling cookbooks. So he then considered Relentless. And here's a fun fact. If you type relentless.com into your browser today, it still redirects to Amazon. Finally, though, he landed on Amazon. It started with an A, which was great for alphabetized lists, and it was named after the world's biggest river, perfect for his ambition to build the everything store.
So the company was officially founded in a Seattle garage. The seed money? A $10,000 investment from his parents' retirement fund. The office setup was famously frugal. We're talking desks made from cheap doors bought at Home Depot. In those early days, they actually had a bell that they would ring for every single sale, a sound that was often punctuated by his now famous laugh, which one employee described as a hyena inhaling nitrous oxide. Eventually, the orders came in so fast that the bell just never stopped ringing.
Look, this wasn't just another startup. This was, as the source materials describe it, the start of a 30-year siege on retail, logistics, and even cloud computing. Those early years were just defined by chaotic, explosive growth. So, this became the core philosophy. Bezos prioritized growth and speed above everything else. Perfection wasn't the goal, scale was. There was no time to polish things, just this pure, frantic urgency to capture as much of the market as humanly possible. He wanted to build a network effect where more customers brought in more sellers, which in turn brought in even more customers, even if it meant he had to lose money for years. And you know what? Wall Street eventually fell in love with it. By the late 90s, Amazon was the poster child of the dot-com bubble. The stock absolutely soared, hitting a peak of over $100 a share. The company still wasn't profitable, not even close, but it didn't matter. It was the future.
Until it wasn't. In March of 2000, the dot-com bubble burst. Tech stocks completely imploded, and Amazon stock crashed from over $100 all the way down to just $6. The company that once seemed unstoppable was suddenly being called Amazon .bomb.
This right here was the crucible. Most of Amazon's competitors, you might remember Pets.com, eToys, they all just vanished into digital dust. Amazon barely, and I mean barely, survived. But in doing so, it was transformed. The crash forged it into something colder, more surgical, and frankly, much, much more dangerous.
So how'd they bounce back? Well, after the crash, Bezos launched a series of strategic kill shots. First, he built a massive logistics and fulfillment empire. Then, in 2005, he launched Prime. Analysts thought free two-day shipping was basically financial suicide, but Bezos knew it was a psychological trap that would engineer incredible customer loyalty. Then, in 2007, came the Kindle. It didn't just change how people bought books, it replaced paper with pixels, completely disrupting the entire publishing industry.
But here's the thing. Amazon's biggest revolution was happening behind the scenes, almost by accident, and it would go on to become one of its most powerful and profitable weapons.
So in the mid-2000s, Amazon's own tech teams were really struggling to manage the company's insane growth, so they built their own solution, this flexible, modular infrastructure for storage and computing. To put it simply, they built a massive, super powerful computer network for themselves, and then they had this light bulb moment. Hey, we could rent out pieces of this to other companies. That internal project was spun out and launched to the public as Amazon Web Services, or AWS.
And this slide just gives you a little taste of how ubiquitous it became. Pretty soon, AWS was powering huge chunks of the internet. We're talking about Netflix, NASA, the CIA, and get this, even some of Amazon's own retail competitors. They were unknowingly paying rent to their biggest rival just to keep their own websites online.
This famous Bezos mantra, it just perfectly captures the company's ruthless efficiency. And it wasn't just some clever slogan, it was a threat. Amazon would identify profitable industries, jump in with lower prices and better logistics, and just systematically squeeze the profit margins of its competitors until they couldn't survive.
Of course, all this immense power didn't come without controversy. Reports started to emerge about grueling conditions inside its fulfillment centers, and lawmakers began raising the alarm about the company's sheer dominance, accusing it of using its own data to clone and crush the small third-party sellers on its own platform.
And as Amazon became something more like a machine than a company, its founder also went through a pretty dramatic transformation himself, all while preparing for his own exit and his next great project.
I mean, the physical change was just striking. Gone was the awkward tech nerd from the 90s with that goofy laugh. The new Bezos was, as one source put it, the final boss of capitalism. Bald, physically imposing, and just carrying himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had literally reshaped reality.
So in 2020, he was summoned to testify before Congress to defend his empire. Then, almost anticlimactically, in 2021, he announced he was stepping down as CEO. He handed the reins to the head of AWS, Andy Jassy. Just like that, the architect was leaving the building.
So, what's next for him? Well, he pivoted right back to his original obsession, space. Blue Origin, the rocket company he'd been quietly funding for years, became his main focus. And this wasn't some new hobby. This was the dream he had declared in his high school graduation speech decades earlier. And his vision, it's astronomical. He's talked about moving all heavy industry off-planet to preserve Earth. He's referred to our home as a beautiful place you can visit, almost like it's a weekend vacation spot. It really reveals a long-term ambition that makes even building Amazon seem kind of small. So here's the crucial takeaway. For the kid who dreamed of space hotels and colonizing the moon, Earth was never the end game. Amazon wasn't the final product, it was the machine he built to fund the real mission. It was his launch pad. So the question that remains is, what is the final destination?